Today, more ridiculous revelations of how Victoria's Labor government has handled the coronavirus crisis that is now threatening New South Wales, ACT. We already know that it bungled the management of its quarantine hotels, got private security guards badly trained to help run them, didn't get the police or the army to do it instead. The guards, big surprise, got the virus and the virus took off again. 288 new cases in Victoria on Friday, 177 today. Well, finally, today, too late, the Victorians did agree to let 1,000 soldiers finally come in part to help run the security. Here's the Federal Health Minister.
1,000 ADF personnel will come to Victoria with the support of and with the acceptance of the Victorian Government in partnership between the Commonwealth and Victoria. This is to protect Victorians, to help contain the virus. The roles will include activities such as isolation, testing, follow-up and checkpoint control.
But today, for heaven's sake, we learn an unknown number of people meant to stay in quarantine for 2 weeks got a message from the Health Department that they could leave early.
It's a very big team and they're making contact with an even larger number of people each and every day, and there will be from time to time human errors will be made.
That's right, errors do get made, but we're talking about fundamental ones that are killing people and will hurt all Australia as Melbourne goes into another lockdown. This government was so tough on bans that didn't make much difference, weak on restrictions that very much did make a difference, and it's now ruining Victoria's economy and hurting the country's. I spoke a short while ago to former Victorian Premier Jeff Kennett, who happens to have been the most can-do Premier in decades. Jeff Kennett, thank you so much indeed for joining me. The Premier today said mistakes get made. How forgiving should we be of them?
Well, we can't forgive mistakes that were clearly those associated with either favouritism in the case of Cedar Meats or gross mismanagement in terms of the quarantine of the hotels. That said, we have, I guess, three major issues. One is dealing with the spread of the virus now. Secondly, it is keeping the lights on here in Victoria. And thirdly, it is preparing to rebound. And they, to me, are the three priorities, although I am sure the accountability will follow probably towards the end of the year or early next.
Let's look at the first of your three priorities, just dealing with what we've got now. Today, 1,000 soldiers, we're told, are going to come and help. 4 months into the crisis, a week and a bit since the state government said yes, no, no, yes, no. Are they welcome, these soldiers?
Andrew, I don't have privy to the Victorian Premier's Gang of Eight or his private cabinet group, so I can't answer that question with any specific knowledge. Suffice to say, the very fact that we're calling in the Army is a clear indication that in part, at least, and maybe in whole, we've lost control of the spread of this virus here in Victoria. If that is the case, then the more assistance we get to put the genie back in the bottle becomes terribly important. What
I find so frustrating, Jeffrey Kennett, is that, you know, I'm not being wise after the event. I said, let's do the basics, you know, really crack down on people in quarantine. That clearly wasn't done. And really, really protect the most vulnerable, which are clearly the elderly, people over 70 years of age, the main people getting killed by this virus. Now we're told that the virus is yet again in more nursing homes. 26 cases linked to the Menarok Life Aged Care Facility in Essendon, 13 linked to the Glendale Aged Care Facility in Werribee, 2 to the Japara Central Park Aged Care Home in Windsor. I mean, this was so clear from the start, and this is, you know, they've closed down a state without, to me, doing the very basics.
Yes, well, I think there'll be a lot here in Victoria who think that as well. I think there's so much of this, when you analyse it, you wish you'd done it differently. even when the towers here, the Housing Commission towers, were identified, and there's been a further leaching of the virus to some of the other towers now, it was an overnight reaction. In other words, it should have been a military operation. It should have been planned properly, the residents informed, food there, etc., etc. It was a knee-jerk reaction. Certainly we need to do something, but the way it was handled was very, very amateurish. And what we've now got is the situation here in Victoria, whereas the Chief Medical Officer said recently we've got 100 different spots where we've got outbreaks. Now, 100 different spots, which he wouldn't name, understandably, and he probably couldn't, that is a massive leaching of the virus away from the authorities. And so we've got ourselves in this awful situation. Can I just sound a warning, though? Quite obviously, in other states, people are feeling very confident and once again being fairly critical of Victoria. Can I just remind all of those in every other state, there by the grace of God go you, and you may still go. So what they should be doing is learning from Victoria what we've done badly and what we've done well in preparation in case this virus spreads, as it seems to be doing now, over the border into New South Wales.
OK, we've dealt with the stuff-ups that have got us into that position. Looking ahead now, you mentioned other states. New South Wales says it might have to do, if the virus outbreak there gets worse, do what Victoria's done and have shutdowns, like all Melbourne is shut down, plus one Shire to the north. Is this the way to go when we're not doing the basics, like keeping the elderly protected, the aged care homes totally shut off, not keeping quarantine hotels into proper lockdown? Is the response really to shut down a whole city, even a whole state, given the devastation we're seeing in mental health and also the financial health of the state?
Andrew, can I put this into my second point, which is keeping the lights on? The third point is the recovery. The second point is keeping the lights on. We don't have a total lockdown in this state whatsoever. We have the city and one regional area that's been so-called locked down. But can I just remind you, correctly, supermarkets are open, but shopping centres are open. And they've got a number of shops in them that are not selling essentials, but people are encouraged to go into shopping centres. We have hardware stores that are open. We have alcohol being sold by all our major distributors. So we do not have a total lockdown, far from it. And this is where we've got conflicting messages from the government. I don't believe in a total lockdown. I think we've got to manage this virus, knowing that it's probably going to be with us maybe for another year or 2 years. But just think about, here in Victoria, our restaurants, which are the cleanest places you can imagine, up until recently could serve 20 and they were going to 50 customers with social distancing. They've all been closed down. And yet, hardware stores, alcohol shops, shopping centres are all open. I would have thought, in order to keep the lights on, to give some of these entrepreneurs the opportunity of surviving and to give people the chance to live a normal life and to employ people, those restaurants should have been allowed to continue to operate. I drove around the city this morning. It is a ghost town. And a lot of those restaurants and a lot of our tourist facilities will not reopen. So when you say lockdown, this isn't a lockdown in totality. It is a selective lockdown, which I think is very, very harmful.
Finally, Jeff Kennett, Daniel Andrews is the only Premier in the country to sign up to China's Belt and Road Initiative against the federal government's advice. The Belt and Road Initiative is China's program to use partnerships and all to increase its power and influence around the world. The Premier says, well, it does mean jobs to Victorians. Is that a good argument?
No, it's not, because the same Chinese government that he has signed up to support in their expansionist policies is the same government that is refusing to take the barley from Victorian farmers. It's the same government that's giving advice to its population not to visit Australia. And it's certainly the same government that's stopping its students from coming to our universities. So Daniel has gone and signed this deal, which I can assure you, more than any other thing that this government has done since they were elected in 2014, and please don't forget, and we won't go through it now, they have a culture of corruption. With the red shirts, when they stole money from the public in 2014, right through to the next election when they tried to prevent the truth being made public, and now the branch stacking using our money again. Even with COVID, the most dangerous aspect for this Labor government is this deal that they have signed with another government which has an expansionist policy to give advantage to them against the interests of Victorians. And I can assure you, and I would say quite clearly now and remind my successor by several, oppositions don't win government, governments lose. And the belts and roads policy will be the undoing of this government more than any other single act or occurrence that we are facing.
Jeff Kennett, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Have a good night.